Okay, we are on Perek Chaf Hey, Pasuk Chaf, 25:20. We just started. Now, there's an interesting question here that somebody once asked me. The commentaries ask that based on a certain pasuk, you'll see on many of the signs that they have in Israel today. There are collections they make, by the way. They're like charity collections for the Shemitah observant farmers in Israel. They're funds that they create for these guys got to support their families for a year without a parnasa. So the pasuk refers to them. I don't know where the pasuk is, but it refers to them. I think it might be in Tehillim. It refers to them as giborei koach. These are the people of great strength. You know, tremendous strength takes a tremendous. You've probably heard of the heter mechira, where they sell the land of Israel during the Shemitah year, because if it's owned by a non-Jew, then you could work the land. The heter mechira is not accepted by any of the mainstream Ashkenazi poskim, the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Yashiv, Rabbi Feinstein, because it's, the whole thing's it's a sham. Nobody's if they sold the land of Israel, then I got to get out of my house. You know, nobody asked me. You know, they can't sell Israel. You know, and who's got the authority anyway to sell Israel? So it's a sham. But these guys are actually doing it, and they keep Shemitah, and they're called. The pasuk calls them Giborei Koach. So there's an interesting question that they ask based on pasuk Chaf Aleph that says 3 lines from the top on page 700, where the Hashem says Vitzivisi es birkosi lochem bashana hashishis. I will order that my blessing will be there in the 6th year. The asa says atvua l'shalosh hashanim, and it'll produce for 3 years. I mean, so that means in the 6th year you've seen production for 3 years. So what's the big deal in the Shemitah year? Why are you called the Giborei Koach? If I saw 3 years of parnasa right now, if somebody put in my bank account 3 years worth of paychecks right now, so I wouldn't be worried for the next 3 years. Not only I wouldn't be worried, you probably wouldn't see me for the next 3 years. But I certainly wouldn't be worried about my parnasa. These guys have just got a bumper crop for 3 years. The Torah says they're going to do. So why are they called the Giborei Koach? Why are you going to call the Giborei Koach? So the simplest answer is probably because this is only, sometimes what if you don't see it? You don't always see it. The stories of when they do see it, especially in our day and age, are they had once in Komemius where they normally produced oranges. The kibbutz I told you, that Komemius, the Frum kibbutz, so documented from 1966, I think it was, where they have an orange grove, and they normally produce 700 tons of oranges in a regular year. 700 tons of oranges in a regular year, so they produce 2,100 in the 6th year, which is exactly 3 times as much. And everybody was wondering around in the other groups, what did you guys do over there? Well, we did the same thing we did. So that's documented. Okay, but that's documented because it's the exception, not the rule. So something, they're Giborei Koach because you don't always see it. Okay, but let's say you did see it. So I think one of the answers could be that it takes a tremendous, if you have a business, how do people decide where to live? How does a couple, a family, how do you decide where to live? Often you decide where to live based on where you're going to make a living. And if the husband's got a job, the husband's making a living, I've always thought about this. If you go into Geula over here, they have a bakery, the Nechama Bakery, which is just, that's a great business. They have a branch right by the Mir, I think, a branch somewhere else. Nobody's going to walk away from a successful business. There's a shoe store that I just bought shoes over there. It's also been there for years. He's got a very successful business. Nobody says one day, you know what, let's move. Let's just move. To where? Let's go to Denver. Why? I don't know. It might be nice over there. Listen, it's nice where you're making parnasa is nice, right? That's how it works in life. Where you're making your parnasa, that's nice. So the Giborei Koach means you're watching your field, and your field producing like crazy. That creates even more temptation to want to work your field now. What, I'm going to walk away from this? You out of your mind? You're going to walk away from that kind of money, and you're just going to walk away from it? That takes a certain strength of character as well. That's a Giborei Koach. Yeah, yes, what are you?
So why is it a 3-year period that they're blessed?
Rashi makes a whole calculation because until you wait, because the way agriculturally, even in the 9th year, you still got to plant it and wait for the produce of that year to go. So you need it for the 7th year, for the 8th year, and then when you plant it, you plant for the 8th year into the 9th year till it's available. Rashi makes the whole calculation of why you need 3 years for the end of the 6th year, 7th year, 8th year. I don't know exactly how the calculation works, but there's going to be a gap of it because you don't plant and it come up instantly. Okay. Except in the Gemara in Tainus, it says that they had a famine once and they planted on the 5th day of the month, and by the 16th day of the month, so they had a bumper crop. So that was in in 11 days they had made it. But that was a miracle. But generally it takes a few months, however it worked. When you plant, when you harvest and so on, Rabbi,
if you're letting the field rest on the 7th year, does that only apply to food producing plants as opposed to like maybe a flax or something that you could use the produce for?
No, you're not allowed to work any of the fields. You can't work any of the fields. And what they do nowadays is, theoretically what's supposed to happen is the field is hefker. One of the reasons, by the way, for Shemitah, among other reasons, is, and I remember I told you the story once, this guy, there's a big Hasidic Rebbe, and there's a very poor family. They can't even afford firewood for the fire in the cold winters in Europe. So he decides to go to this very wealthy man and ask him for a donation. So he comes walking, the Rebbe comes walking with his entourage, and the Rebbe, is with the cold, with the coat, and the man is sitting in his home and he sees, ooh, the Rebbe is coming. And so he runs outside in his shirt sleeves to greet the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says to him, listen, Feivel, there's a very poor family over here. They can't afford firewood. They're in their home. They're cold. It's winter. He says, yeah. He says, and the Rebbe kind of drays it out. He says, we're looking for a donation for them. He says, yeah, okay. And finally, he says, Rebbe, maybe we could go inside. He says, yeah, okay. So they go inside the house, and he writes them out a nice, generous check. He says, Rebbe, can I just ask you one question? Why did you keep me outside for so long? We could have gone right into the house. You stood there talking outside in our shirt sleeves. He says, if I come into your warm, toasty house, and I would tell you there's a family that's suffering from the cold, you'd write them out an $18 check, right? That sort of thing. But when you're outside and you yourself are freezing a little bit, and you could experience what it's like in the outside, and it's cold, then you get a little more sensitivity. You realize what people are going through. When a person owns property, you have a job, and you own property, and poor people come to you, it's very difficult to really feel for the other guy. It's difficult to feel for the other guy. Shemitah is a time where it says, you know what, now you see what it's like. Now you see a little bit what it's like. Okay, I know a year from now I'll have my property back, I'll be able to work my field, but now you see what it's like. Now you can relate to the other people. What's supposed to happen in a Shemitah year is the fields are fallow. Everybody could go into the fields. Everybody is allowed to go through your field. It's hefker. You don't own the field for the Shemitah year. Anybody who wants could go in and pick the stuff that grows in the field. What they do nowadays is they have something called Otzar Beis Din. And the Otzar Beis Din is where you turn your field over to the Beis Din, and then the Beis Din hires people to work the field and you could sell it at cost. You sell the product. What the Beis Din does in Israel is they rehire the owner of the field. You don't want people traipsing through your field because then they're going to break the branches. Nobody cares about your stuff as much as you do. So the way it works nowadays, they call something Otzar Beis Din. Otzar Beis Din means this is under Beis Din supervision. They rehire the owner of the field, and he works the field and sells the produce at cost. He's not allowed to make a profit on it. That's one of the heterim during the Shemitah year. But a person has to understand that to walk away from a bumper crop where you got a business that's making money, that's a very difficult thing. Okay, now I want to go on to what do you call it? First, I take a pasuk Perek Chaf Hey. Take a pasuk Lamed Hey. Right after Shemitah, maybe we can turn on the air. Right after Shemitah, it says, V'chiyamucha chicha, page 702. 702, 5 lines from the top. V'chiyamucha chicha umata yado imach. Your brother waxes poor. V'chezakta bo. Take hold of him. Ger v'tosha v'chay imach. Converts, dwellers, and he should live with you. In other words, make sure you support people. And here the Torah is emphasizing why the commentaries ask, number one, why does it say this right after the Shemitah? Why is this pasuk written here right after Shemitah? So this goes back to the old principle of Shemitah. We all have to live with bitachon, right? Now, it's very tempting. Well, if I've gone a year and I've strengthened my own faith in God, then, someday, maybe on a regular year, a poor man knocks on my door. A poor man knocks on my door, he needs some help. So I'm likely to say, just have bitachon. Just have bitachon. That's all you need is to have some bitachon. Right? No, that's not our job. Our job is that bitachon is for ourselves. When it comes to a poor man, we have to do everything we physically can for somebody else. Not only a poor man, for any Jew that we're going to help. The Baal Shem Tov has a very interesting idea. There's a Gemara if you look at the Gemara in Chulin, on Daf Kuf Tes Amud Beis. So the Gemara says that Rav Nachman's wife said to Rav Nachman, everything that the Torah forbids, the Torah has a permissible counterpart. So, for example, the Torah forbids eating blood, but you are allowed to eat liver. And the liver, halachically, is regarded, even the expression is kulo dam. Liver is completely, but that's why when you kosher liver, you can't kosher it with salt like you kosher chickens. The only way to kosher liver is by roasting out all the blood. So there is no blood left in the liver after you roast it out. It's got to be roasted over an open fire. You can't salt liver because the blood will stay in. But so the Torah says this you can't eat, but this you could eat. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat pork, but you are allowed to eat a certain fish, the brains of a certain fish, which is supposed to taste very much like pork. Right? So she said this to Rav Nachman. Certain things are forbidden, yet certain things are permissible. You're not allowed to live with a married woman, but you are allowed to live with a woman who's been divorced while her husband's alive. That's the next best thing. And then you get a what do you call it? The sense of she's a married woman, right? There's a count. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara gives a list of examples over there about things that are forbidden. Yet there seems to be a kosher counterpart. There's something that we could, if you must. I mean, in our day and age, it's not a problem at all. You can't have a cheeseburger, but you could have a kosher cheeseburger in two different ways, right? You could have beef with parva cheese, right, on it, or you could have soy with milchik cheese on it, right? Oh, Baruch Hashem, we got past the problem of cheeseburgers, right? Now they have what's it called, the Impossible Burger, right? Which is supposed to really taste like meat. I can't wait to get a hold of one of those. Right, they have. I don't know if they have them in Israel. They have them in America with the Hechsher, the Impossible Burger. Right, somebody said to me please, but don't but just make sure it's fresh. Someone said it even bleeds like a burger. Right? Yeah, does it? Is it good? Does it taste like meat?
It's pretty good.
Is it pretty good? Is it good? Well, that I could get used to. So you got what do you call it? What's it called? The Impossible Burger. I don't know if that's because of the description of the price or what it is, but whatever. At the end of the day, there's a kosher guy. So the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, the Torah forbids us being deniers of God. Where's the kosher counterpart of that? The Baal Shem Tov, it's from a Hasidic take. He said, where you're allowed to be a kofar? You know where you can be a kofar? When it comes to somebody else's needs. When it comes to somebody else's needs, don't be such a man of faith and say, just have bitachon. You have to make every effort you can as if it's all dependent on you. For your own needs, you have to be a full believer. You have to make your hishtadlus, which means you have to work a couple hours a day. You have to make your hishtadlus and get a job, that sort of thing. But for somebody else's needs, you have to pretend. Obviously, you can't be a kofar. But you have to treat it as if it's all dependent on you. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. So this guy graduates from medical school. And, after, 6 years or 46 years of medical school, whatever it is, and he's getting ready for his final exam. So he goes to this professor, the guy who's giving him his final exam, and he says to him, what happens to you? What happens if you see a guy's bleeding? What do you do? So he says, you give him a certain treatment. He says, what if you don't have the medication? You give him a different treatment. He says, what if you don't have that? Say you take a towel and you wrap it around and you stop the bleeding. He says, what if you don't have a towel? The guy, I don't know. He says, okay, you fail. You can't become a doctor. He says, what? I went to school for 6 years. I've been to school. Because I don't know the answer to one question. He says, okay, you don't answer the question. What do you do under those circumstances? You tear your own shirt, you tie it on him. Why did you think of it? You didn't think of it because you don't care enough about him. If you don't care enough about him, you can't become a doctor. You have to care about the guy so much that you don't even have to think about an answer like that. Because when a Jew needs help, the financial help, sometimes people need help with it could be help with the learning, it could be help. Person has to be able to relate to the person what the kind of suffering that person is going through. That's how we have to keep him alive. We have to be able to relate to somebody the way we're what do you call the word? You have to empathize. You have to empathize with the guy. You have to really feel it. That's what the Torah demands of us. Now, here, right after this, the Torah says, keep him alive. Now you'll notice one of the Mefarshim asks the following question. It says, Vehechezakta bo. How would you translate that? If you were really translating Vehechezakta bo, literally, how would you translate it?
Hold him.
To hold him. And if I really want to say to support him, how would I say it? I would say Vehechezakta oso. Why is it Vechazakta bo? It's a strange turn of phrase. Why is it Vechazakta bo? I would say Vechazakta oso. Hechazakta bo means you hold on to him. Right? We have that in davening. Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba. It is a tree of life for those who take hold of it. It means if you take hold of Torah supports you. So the Mefarshim say, the Gemara says, more than what the balabas does for the poor man does for the balabas. You're giving him financial aid and he's keeping you out of Gehenna. Right? He's giving this person the world to come. So more than what the poor man, what you do for the poor man does for you. By you giving him tzedakah, he's doing you a favor. He's allowing you to accumulate either reward or avoid punishment, whatever case. So the Torah says, "Vechazakta bo." I want you to support him. But what it literally means is take hold of him. He is your lifeline. When you give him tzedakah and you support him, he is your lifeline. That's what the Torah says. Then the Torah says, Al tikach me'ito neshech. Don't take interest if you lend him money, because sometimes lending money is the biggest form of chesed you could do. You let a guy get back on his feet. Al tikach me'ito neshech. Don't take interest. V'sarbis. There are different forms of interest. There's one type of interest that has each year it accumulates more. The Ramban says there's another type of interest where he pays you back on a certain date at a set rate. I pay you I'll give you $100 loan, and and 2 months from now you give me back $110, right? Versus where I say to you, I'll give you a $100 loan, and each year that you don't pay back, it accumulates more, right? Whatever the interest rate is. So there are two types of interest. Both are Isser D'Oraisa. Both are forbidden by Torah law. Neshech means you're biting him. And it's called neshech because when you borrow something and they tell you the terms sound okay. What's 7%? What's 7% compounded annual? Whatever the fancy words they use. So you find out at the end of the year you owe a pile, right? And it's like when a snake bites you, it's one little puncture wound, and the next thing you know, a person's whole body swells up. We had a guy in our neighborhood, a kid in our neighborhood, who actually got bit. This is going back about maybe about a year and a half ago. A kid was on a hike here in Israel. He got bit by a venomous snake. And he was gone. I think they told the family he's got maybe 3 hours to live. Kid made it out of the hospital. Baruch Hashem, he's alive. Mama said that was a mama. He was a goner. So when a snake bites a person with a little bit of a puncture wound, next thing you know, it swells up. The whole body's affected. That's what happens when you take interest. You take interest, it sounds good, and next thing you know, you're paying more than you could possibly have imagined, because you can't picture. You don't envision in the beginning what this is really going to cost you over the course of time. So it's called, and it's seriously forbidden. It's a what do you call it? A serious Isser D'Oraisa. So much so that the Gemara says somebody who lends with interest will not arise at Tchias HaMesim. Somebody who lends with interest will not arise at the resurrection of the dead. Why not? Why not? The answer is, look at the very previous pasuk. Because the previous pasuk says, pasuk lamed hey, 5 lines from the top. Vechezakta bo, ger v'toshav, v'chai imach, keep him alive. Keep him alive. Lend him money if he needs. You didn't lend him money properly. You took interest. You didn't keep him alive. How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu work? Mida keneged mida. You get what you deserve. Mida keneged mida. This person will not arise at the resurrection of the dead. That's what Chazal say. Very severe avera to lend with interest. And the problem is it's a tremendous temptation. It's a tremendous temptation. Excuse me one second. And there's a certain logic here which begs a different. By the way, there's a famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eger, where there was a Jew in a certain town who was very, very wealthy. On the one, first of all, he never gave charity, never gave tzedakah. He was a tremendous miser, And when he did lend money, he lent with interest. And eventually this guy died. So his children went to the Chevra Kadisha. They said to the Chevra Kadisha, our father needs to be buried. So the Chevra Kadisha said, okay, it's 5,000 rubles. So that's ridiculous. The burial normally costs 250 rubles. You're charging us 20 times as much. That's ridiculous. He said, listen, your father never gave tzedakah. He lent with interest. It's payback time. Right? 5,000 rubles, or we let the body rot in the sun. That's ridiculous. So they went to Rabbi Akiva Eiger for Din Torah. So he went to Rabbi Akiva Eiger and said, they're price gouging us. This is absolutely ridiculous. Rabbi Akiva said, let me explain to you. Normally, the price is 250 rubles. Why? Because we bury people, then eventually they're going to get up at the resurrection of the dead. So essentially, it's a rental. For rental, we charge 250 rubles. But your father lent with interest. He's not going anywhere. He's got to buy the place. For buying it, it costs 5,000 rubles. That's what the very famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eiger. By the way, there's another famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eiger where a man refused to give his wife a get. And he came to Rabbi Akiva Eiger's Beis Din. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger said to this man, give your wife a get. And he said, I refuse to give my wife a get. Rabbi Akiva Eiger said, Gemara in Kedushin says a woman acquires her freedom through two ways, either a get or the death of the husband. And he said, well, toodle-dee-doo, I'm not giving her a get. And he walked out of Rabbi Akiva's court, Rabbi Akiva's Beis Din, fell down the front steps, and he died. Documented story. So this Rabbi Akiva Eiger, so the guy who lends with interest doesn't get up to the resurrection. Now the question is like this: what's wrong with it? What's wrong with lending with interest? The whole world works on interest. Sorry, the whole world works on interest. And not only that, I'm going to lend you money. You're going to make money with my money. And I'm not going to make money with my money. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why should you make money with my money? And I'm not. It's my money. Why are you borrowing it? You're borrowing my money so you can make money. So you're borrowing my money. You're going to make money, and I can't make money? I mean, it makes sense. That's why the whole world works on interest. Everybody understands that interest. Banks lend with interest. I think they raised the interest rates in the United States now, which is why the dollar is up. The dollar got stronger. I have no idea why that works, by the way. I just remember my father all the time always talking about raising interest rates. I said everything about interest rates. Oh, the banks raised the interest rates. I have no idea what that means. But I know that the dollar is up now. The dollar is stronger. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? Not only that, let's make the question stronger. You are allowed to lend with interest to a non-Jew. You're allowed to lend and take interest with a non-Jew, but you're not allowed to lend to a Jew. Why not? Sorry. Why not? So there are two approaches to the subject. Approach number one is the Gemara says in Kedushin, various professions and what they think of various professions. Certain professions, like a doctor, it says, Tov Shibarofim LeGehenim. That the best of doctors goes to Gehenim. That's what the Gemara says. Because in Gehenim, they need good doctors. That's right. It says, because the doctor might not treat people well, he might be a little overconfident, he might be haughty. There are all sorts of reasons. Then the Gemara says, Hasaponim, saponim means merchants who travel the high seas. Ruban Chasidim. Most merchants are pious. It doesn't mean they wear shtreimel. Hasaponim Ruban Chasidim means most merchants who travel the seas are pious. They're Chasidim. Why are they Chasidim? I mean, I've met some longshoremen. They struck me as anything other than Chasidim. They're the most pious people in the world. It says, why is that? The answer is because in the old days, sea travel was dangerous. Ships could get, what do you call it, storms at sea and lost at sea, and they could go off the edge of the earth. All sorts of things that could happen to ships. So when you're in a ship, and all of a sudden things get a little choppy in the ocean, what do? Start davening, you pray. You pray. You ever been on an airplane with turbulence? Yeah. Okay, some people aren't bothered by it. But if you've ever been on an airplane with turbulence and there are Beis Yaakov girls on the plane, you see those Tehillim come out so fast, right? You cannot imagine, right? The men are just like, whoa. The girl like, that's what you call it. So turbulence isn't really dangerous. There are far more dangerous things than flying than turbulence. Turbulence is not they're dangerous, otherwise it wouldn't be flying planes. Actually, once spoke to an Israeli pilot. There's a guy who's a friend of mine, is a Baal Tshuva, an American military, married an Israeli girl who has two brothers who were in the Israeli Air Force. They both flew. One flew F-15s. One was a pilot. One was a helicopter pilot. He wasn't quite as good as the other ones. He only flew helicopters. And so I was always curious about certain things about flying. So I called this guy. I asked if I could call his brother is completely secular, anti-religious, and I asked him if I could call his brother-in-law the pilot. So I called him. I said, "Hi, I'm Plony's friend. I was wondering if I could ask you." And he sounded like a pilot on the phone. Hello, yes. They're very calm. So I was asking about certain things. At a certain point, I asked about turbulence. I asked about if certain things are dangerous. So he said to me, "No, that's not really dangerous. What is dangerous is when your friends get up to pray on the airplane." So I said to him, "Yeah, but they're just praying that they should have a good pilot." Right, and that's how our conversation ended. Right. So it says that merchants, Aruba and Hasidim, they're pious. Merchants are pious. Okay. Why? Because they're dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a person works, when you go to work, part of going to work is that you turn to God. By the way, the commentaries say, if you look on the previous page where it says V'chisobru manocha v'shana shvis, the second line, if you say, well, what are we going to eat on the 7th year? The commentaries say you should be saying that on the 3rd year also, and in the 4th year also. Just because you have a job, you should still be saying, and what are we going to eat? It's just that the job deceives us into thinking that we're not dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ultimately, you are. Who is least dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When you lend with interest, it's a great parnasa. Because all you do, you have very little overhead. All you have to do is hire a couple of thugs to break people's knees if they don't pay back on time. It's very, right? And keep them well fed with raw meat, right? That's all you need. And then you sit in your home, and you sit in your office, and you open up envelopes stuffed with cash. And when you have, the more you have and the easier it is, the less the connection between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is severed. That's why the halacha is, you can't lend the Jew with interest even if he's willing to. Do me a favor, I need the money. I want the money, I'll pay you back, and I'm happy to pay you back with interest. You're not allowed to. The prohibition is both on the lender, it's on the buyer and on the lender. You're not allowed. Why? Two things. Number one, it's an inconvenience to the lender. But the lender's not inconvenienced. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to take the loan. I would, if not for you, I'll get it from the bank. It's also, what is it going to do to your bitachon? If you lend with interest, what's it going to do to you? It's going to sever the connection between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that connection, that's why the serpent in the original sin, what was the punishment to the serpent? Lost his legs. Okay. That's right. Al gechon chadei. What else?
The woman will break the head of.
That's also a problem. That's also a problem. It says wherever he goes, he has his food. Everywhere a snake goes, he has his food. What kind of punishment is that? Most teenagers I know would be thrilled. Everywhere you go, there's food, right? What's wrong with that? A snake goes around and you'll eat the dust of the earth. Dust of the earth means he eats little rodents and everything. He's got his parnos everywhere he goes. The answer is, it's like the father saying to his kid, here, just take it. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see it. Just take it. Just take it and go. I don't want to see it. Just go. Just go. That means you've been banished from the king. You've been banished. There's no connection. You got an easy parnos, so just stay away from me. Take what you want. Just stay away. I don't want to see you. So a rich man who's lending with interest, that's what happens. It severs his connection. I don't need to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not healthy. It's not good for you. Why are you allowed to lend to a non-Jew? Why are you allowed to lend to a non-Jew? Because through Jewish history, Jews, when there were anti-Semitic laws, the only profession in many cases that they could be involved with was money lending. And then one of two things happened. Either the anti-Semites would pay back, or there would be a pogrom, and they would kill the Jews and burn the records. So it was far from the certainty you're going to get your money back when you lend to the non-Jews. Therefore, the Torah says to the non-Jews you could lend. But to the Jew, where you know Jews are going to pay you back, there, you're not allowed to do it. That's reason number one. There's a second reason. And the second reason is that there isn't something inherently wrong with interest, because, like I said earlier, the entire world lends on interest. Everywhere you go, all banks, all businesses lend on interest. The whole world works on interest. But what would happen if your brother came and asked you for a loan? Would you charge your brother interest? Nobody charges your brother interest. You don't charge your family interest. Family members are different. What kind of person are you if you charge your brother interest? What kind of person are you? What kind of person are you if you charge? I had a guy once at Shear, I said that, and the guy says to me, oh, I lent money to my mother and I charged her interest. Yeah, all I was thinking, I was looking at this guy, all I wanted to do is take him back in a barn and give him a whooping, right? That's all I wanted. You charge your mother interest? Maybe she should charge you for when she changed your diapers. You know, there's a whole back fee over there, you know, and she should charge you for all the food you. What kind of business are you? Charge your mother interest? You charge your brother interest? Nobody decent person would do that. The Torah is saying, Jews are a family. Jews are a family. It's not that there's something wrong with interest. There are two approaches there. One thing is that there's something wrong with it. The other approach is even if there's nothing wrong with it, you treat your family different than you treat other people. We expect better from you. And therefore the Torah says you're not allowed to charge interest.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is there a way of teshuva for a person that might...
Everybody can do tshuva from everything. There's always a way of doing tshuva. If a person has lent money, a person stole money or was dishonest in business, often you have to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not positive about this, but I think that whereas if you steal money, you have to pay it back, to do tshuva for taking with interest, I don't think you have to give that money back. Do tshuva is then you have to say klap al chet. It's between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not sure. I'm not positive. What's that?
Tzedakah, perhaps?
Tzedakah's always good. Tzedakah always works. If you're somebody's tefillin falls on the ground, that works. It's certainly my money things. It's always good to give tzedakah. I'm not positive, but I think if I remember correctly, I think that when it comes to interest, you don't have to what's it called when you reimburse. You don't have to reimburse the person. Tzedakah is certainly a good thing, to take money that was, sometimes, let's say a guy had a restaurant and he was selling non-kosher food, right? You don't have to reimburse anybody over there, but you're selling non-kosher food to Jews and you want to do tshuva, so tzedakah is certainly a good thing, to do something with money, make it hurt, right? That's always the best tshuva. Tzedakah is always a good way of doing tshuva, because that's the great equalizer. Now, the other question people ask is, so why are you allowed to rent equipment? Why is that? I'm not allowed to rent you my money. What is interest, essentially? I'm renting you my money. My money I can't rent you, but I can rent you my lawnmower. Right? Why? And not only that, people rent things to even if I don't charge my brother rent for my lawnmower, if it breaks, he's going to reimburse me. That's you're not concerned. No, don't worry about it. Why? What's the difference between the two? Yeah. Somebody raising a hand. What's the difference between renting out my lawnmower and renting out my money? What's the difference? Yeah, what do you say?
Because you're losing money. You're potentially losing money for using your object.
How?
Because they're using it when I could be using it.
The same thing with the money. Same thing with my money.
Money is already too far. You can't say like, oh, I could have used that money, but like my lawnmower.
Well, I would use the money. I'd use my money before I use my lawnmower. That's for sure.
You don't know.
I know. What did we say?
Two things. For example, when you buy something from a store, you have to make money because you have overhead, right? Why you should only be.
I'm not in the lawnmower business. I'm not in a rental business. I have a lawnmower. A guy says, "Can I do me a favor? I want to rent your lawnmower." I'm not in the lawnmower. I'm not in a rental business. You want to rent it? Rent it. Go ahead, rent.
Paying for a service.
Paying for a service? Why? What's the service? It's a rental. So when you're paying for it, I can say I'm paying for a service with my money also. What do you say, Steve?
Because money comes in and goes out. You will always get more money and you always spend more.
Oh, you do, huh?
You don't
I've heard that expression, money comes and money goes. There's only one problem with that.
You're not always
It
gonna
goes a
buy-
lot more than it comes. That's the
But
problem.
You're always just going to go buy a new lawnmower.
You're not, well, okay, so one of the reasons is because there's wear and tear on equipment. On equipment, there's wear and tear. Rental makes sense. You rent something because there's wear and tear. And when you're using my lawnmower, I'm actually losing money because everything has a limited life. Equipment has a limited life, right? Whereas money, there's no wear and tear on the money. So the wear and tear on the money. So the money you're not allowed. But the Torah says that's why you're not allowed to lend with interest. Okay, one last point here. And we're going to stop early today. But one last point. When if you take a look at Perek Chaf, Where are we?
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
We're at Chafei. Take a look at Pasuk Zayin. Go back for a second. Chafei Pasuk Zayin. Is this where it is? No. I'm in the wrong place. One second. Chafei Zayin. No, that's I got the wrong place. But check it. Let me just check. There's something from the Chafetz Chaim over here. Just one second. Where is it? Maybe it's Chaf Vav Zayin. Check Chaf Vav Zayin for a second. No, I can't find it. All right. Oh, okay, here it is on 704. So right at the bottom, when it talks about how to redeem fields, there's a whole process of redeeming fields and how you calculate the cost. So if you look at the bottom of page 704, it says, Imod Rabos Bashanim, if there are many years left, 704, 2 lines from the bottom. L'fia and Yoshiv Geulaso Mikesef Miknaso. Based on the calculation of how many years and how much use of the field, that's how much you calculate the redeeming of the field. V'ma'at nishar bashanim ad shnasa yovel. If only a few years remain, v'chishav lo keshev shnaz of Yoshiv es Geulaso. Then again, you make a lower calculation. The Chafetz Chaim asks a question which many of us have asked. Are we on a higher level or lower level than the Vilna Gaon? Yes, maybe slightly, yes. How about the Rashba? Yes. And Rabbi Akiva Eger, and the Chassam Sofer, and the Chafetz Chaim himself, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. So the question that many of us ask is, we believe as a fundamental of our faith, Mashiach is going to come. And did you ever wonder, well, he didn't come for the Chafetz Chaim, and he didn't come for Rabbi Akiva Eger. Now, why would he come for me? Right? Why would Mashiach come in our generation, whereas in those generations he hasn't come? What do you say, Ezra?
Well, at Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were at the 49th level of Tuma, and we were like on the lowest level when God redeemed us.
And the lowest level when God, good, okay, that's true. That's over there, it says that, yeah, that's true. That's a good answer. It's a good answer. So what the Chafetz Chaim says is like this. When there's a great, what do you say, Jake?
I was just going to quote what Rabbi said about this, that really he likened it to climbing like a mountain, right? And all of those big Rebbeim, they did 99.999% of the.
And we're just all we got to do is right. So
last few
they compare it. There is an approach like that. They compare it also to people who goes down into a diamond mine. You get the crudest, coarsest people who are willing to go into a mine. They're pulling out diamonds, right? So sometimes we have to be the people who have been selected for a generation where the entire society around us is dirtier than a diamond mine. But we're the ones who are going to get out the diamond. That's one of the approaches. The Chafetz Chaim says a reason that he says, you see from the fields, the farther the distance is, the higher the cost. Right? The less time is left, so then the cost is cheaper. Right? The closer we get to it, the less the cost has to be. So it could be that even since we're so close. So I'm just a little hesitant. We are not at a low level. To the contrary, it could be that you're at a higher level relative to than lots of other people in previous generations, right? But just from an objective world point of view, we are seen as being a lower level generation. But that's not a problem because there's also less time till Mashiach comes. Because all that other time is elapsed. Even for us, Mashiach could come. Okay, we'll stop.